listening to the IELTS podcast.
So sentence guides actually help me to have a clearer picture what to write in a proper way. So that actually saved my time.
Masters of IELTS preparation. Your host, Ben Worthington.
Hello there, IELTS students. In this episode, we're going to talk about IELTS Academic Task 1, and specifically, which tense are we going to use? And we're going to look at the golden rules, we're going to look at the different tenses, and there's lots of examples, and this is a really practical tutorial. And like I say in most of the podcasts, I would strongly consider getting a pen, making notes, and then comparing your notes with the podcast. And just jump online and go on to just put IELTS Podcast 126, and you'll find this whole post with the tutorial, and you can just compare your versions. And once again, maybe you can write some sentences about it, some more sentences, test your knowledge, and then get some feedback. If you're in a rush but still a bit confused about IELTS Academic Task 1, if you go over to sentenceguide.com, and in the top corner you can see there is a link that says courses, and you can see all the courses that are available there, and you can get a course with just the theory with no feedback. You can get a course with feedback included, and what I wanted to say is that you can get IELTS academic course, okay, and in that course I'll just quickly go over the chapters, because each chapter is basically really designed on what I was hearing the students needed. Okay, so lesson 1, we look at what information to write about. That's really practical actually, and it gives you a structure to follow so you know exactly what to write, what information to choose. Then lesson 3 is sentence structures. Then lesson 4 is it's called a very valuable technique to describe data. Lesson 5, an essential technique to score band 7. Lesson 6, what tenses, and that's really practical, and it's a little bit similar to what we're going to describe now, but more compact. And let's see, it's more compact, and it's very similar, but more orientated around it's very similar, sorry, and you get exercises. And the big takeaway here is that you can send your essays in afterwards and get feedback. There's also lots of chapters about the vocabulary, and even a advanced sentence structures chapter where you can go over and learn lots of even more valuable sentences. Okay, so let's dive into this one. So the first golden rules, okay, there's 2 very basic rules here when we're describing our graphs. Okay, the first one is to look at the title and look at the X and Y axes. Okay, those are the lines going across the base and the one going vertically up, and have a look at the dates. This is key. And if the date or if the year is before the current date, which today, look at your watch, look at your phone, and if it's before, then obviously we're going to use the past tense. Okay, if it's after, we're going to use the future tense, and if there is no year, if there is no time reference, we can use the present simple. Okay, so the other rule is, and when you're following this, make sure that you don't accidentally change the tense halfway through. Okay, halfway through the sentence. That's essential. So you can add that on your error list when you're reviewing your essay. Make sure you don't do that. And then the second rule is that sometimes you get charts and graphs that will deliberately require you, not deliberately, sorry, that will require you to use more than one tense, okay? So it might be sort of like historical data mixed with forecasts into the future. So be careful. And here's a very valuable tip. If you do get something like that with maybe historical data in one part of the graph and forecasts in the next part, then I would strongly recommend writing a paragraph about the historical one and then a second paragraph clearly separated talking about the future tenses. Okay? Now, if you are having real problems, then have a look at all the verb tenses. English is relatively easy with regards to verb tenses. My German friends said that there's like over, 19 different verb tenses. So in summary, in English, there's roughly about 12. And it probably would be a good idea just to review those and maybe write some sample sentences, do the look, cover, write technique, where you look at the sentence, cover it up and try and write it from memory, maybe do some translations and just a quick review. So let's have a look. When are we going to use the past tense? I'm going to do this tutorial with the graphs in front of me and I can see a horizontal bar chart, and if you can draw this would be fantastic. Horizontal bar chart, so all the bars are going horizontally across. Right at the top it says 1900, 1900, and then on the base it says pounds per person, LB, pound per person. And the graph on the x-axis starts in the year 2000 and goes up to 1900 in 10-year increments, and across the x-axis it goes from 40 to 100, and I won't go through each detail, and the title of the graph, which I should have said before, is US sugar consumption 1900 to 2000. The smart ones amongst you, which are probably 95% of you all, would have recognized some of the key vocabulary there. And the key vocabulary were horizontal bar chart, x-axis, y-axis, pounds per person, and not only the vocabulary, but the attention to detail of the increments of the years and and the units used. And we can see here there's an overall trend and there's a few exceptions. So let's have a look at the tense. Well, from the graph we can clearly see that it's all going to be in the past because it finishes in the year 2000. So a sample sentence here could be, between 1900 and 2000, the sugar consumption of US citizens more than doubled from £45 per person to £100 per person. Can you see we use the past tense? Sugar consumption more than doubled. It can be noted that the most significant rise occurred between 1920 and 1930, when the average person increased their intake by £13. So the whole paragraph, in fact, was in the past tense and all in the simple past and coherent all the way through. And by the way, we've used a fancy sentence there, more than doubled, so we would have picked up points, and we've given an idea of the overall trend as well. Okay, so that's quite simple and quite straightforward. Now the future tense. Okay, I've got a graph in front of me, and the title of the graph reads Mobile Growth Continues Through 2020. Clearly in the future. It's in the future. Once again, it's a horizontal bar chart, and there's lots of comparisons between mobile phone growth, people with electricity, people with bank accounts, running water, people with cars, and people with landlines. Each bar is a percentage of the population, And basically, it's trying to demonstrate that by 2020, more people will have mobile phones than electricity. And it's showing a percentage of people in the world with each, which possess or have access to each, I guess you can call it unit, or each device, service, or unit. For example, 58% of the population have bank accounts, but 69% of the population have mobile phones. So I'll give you an example of a sentence that we can use. It can be seen from the bar chart. That's a good way to start your sentences in Academic Task 1. It can be seen. It can be seen from the bar chart that by 2020, the population owning mobile phones will exceed the number with electricity by 1%. Okay, because the difference there is 69% of the global population, 68% of the global population with electricity. It is also predicted, can you see we've used this sentence? It is also predicted that more people will have running water at 45% than a landline at 28%. The key language here is, number one, by 2020, we can use that to start the sentence as well. By 3000, by the year 3000, by the year 2050, or by 2018, mobile phone usage, or global population, or access to water, or whatever. But we can just use that sentence, by 2020. Okay, next one, will exceed. Here it's a future simple, will exceed. You can use this, for example, in the old one, in the chart we said before about sugar consumption. If it was about the future, we could say sugar consumption will exceed £100 per person by the year 2020, for example. The other key sentence in the same tense is will have running water, and future simple again, will have access to, will be visiting the United States if we're talking about a graph about tourism. And the key sentence to master is it is predicted, it is forecasted, it is believed. It is believed that global warming will reach peaks in the year 2020 or 2030. Can you see? In the Academic Task 1, we're not going to use going to because it sounds a little bit colloquial, so our options are limited. We'll definitely use the future simple will, and we're also going to use this structure, it is predicted, because we want to introduce more variety and more structures into our writing to increase our grammatical range and accuracy, specifically grammatical range and lexical resource. Now, let's go and have a look at present simple tense. This might be a little bit more confusing when we're talking about the years and the dates, so we need to pay more attention. Let's have a look at a graph from, I think it's from the World Health Organization, and the graph is titled Prevalence of Overweight People in the Anglosphere. And we've got, this is a vertical bar chart, and there are 6 countries, United States, New Zealand, Australia, UK, Canada, and Ireland. And the percentage of people that are overweight in the country is on the left. So it goes from 0 and goes in 10% increments, and then across the base are the countries, but it's color coded, and we've got a key to the graph on the right where it clearly shows which countries are which colors. There isn't really that much reference to years. At the bottom it says source World Health Organization 2007. How are we going to describe this? We can use the present tense. I'll give you an example. It can be seen, that very useful sentence we've we should be including in most of our essays, it can be seen from the chart that there are currently more overweight Americans than Irish. Can you see we've used the present tense, that there are currently more overweight Americans than Irish? In fact, there are almost 30% more overweight US citizens. The next most overweight group in the Anglosphere are the New Zealanders, with 68.4% of the population, presently considered weighing more than recommended. So as we mentioned before, occasionally you might get a graph with references to time both in the past and in the future. In this case, you will be varying your tenses. The graph I'm going to use as an example is a line chart, or a line graph, starting in 1990, ending in 2040, and it clearly shows the world energy consumption by fuel type starting in 1990, ending in 2040, and the units are quadrillion BTU, and the fuel types used in the graph are nuclear, renewables, natural gas, coal, and liquids. So, that's just one tip there. How do you start your graph? Well, how do you start your description? You just give a general description of what the graph shows, not the story. I didn't mention once that they're all increasing. I didn't mention which was the least popular. I didn't mention which was the most popular, which is going to grow the most. All I did was just tell you what's in front of me. So
the future perfect
refers to we're going to vary our tenses because the graph between 1990 and 2040. We're going to use this tense to get the highest points. What we need to do is compare the changes back between an action time will be completed. To do this, it's a bit difficult to get your head around. But what you need to know basically, one of the less is usual subject tenses in English will have perfect and then the past participle. Let me give you an example. Going back to the text we said before. However, it is predicted that coal and liquid fuels will have relatively the same amounts of consumption in 2030 at around 200 quadrillion BTUs. We could say something like all combined fuels will have passed 150 quadrillion BTUs by the year 2020. I would write that down, write a few practice sentences, and get familiar with that tense if you're not 100% familiar with it. So that's it for today. What I would recommend you doing, another recommendation, is go to IELTSPodcast.com, and you can sign up to the newsletter where you get updates about the newest podcasts, tutorials, get links, just lots of emails, helpful emails that'll help you score higher, and you also get access to a massive PDF which is called IELTS Materials, and in that you've got about 19 sample academic essays, academic task 1 essays. You've got a whole mini book containing speaking cue cards, containing lots of speaking tips. There's about 240 IELTS Task 2 questions. There's just absolutely loads of material that you can use to help you pass the exam. So I'd go over to IELTSPodcast.com, sign up, get all those goodies for free, and increase your chances of passing. And like I said before, if you're in a bit of a rush and you need the fastest route to pass the exam and you don't want to be messing around, paying for a resit, paying for a remark, and you just want to get the exam band score you need as fast as possible, I'd strongly have a look at the website www.sentenceguide.com. Have a fantastic day and all the best for the exam.
for listening to IELTSPodcast.com.